Hi, everybody. I'm Rick Warren, pastor of Saddleback Church and author of The Purpose Driven Life. And I want to talk to you for just a moment, pastor to pastor, pastor to leader, about something that I know can absolutely revolutionize your church. We call it the power of the short campaign. One of the secret sauces of Saddleback Church for 33 years that has given us unbroken growth has been what we call the annual campaign. It is a short 6-week period where we focus everybody on the church in multiple formats to study one thing at one time. The sermons, the music, the small groups, a daily devotional, a memory verse, projects, everything in the church revolves around studying, for instance, love or worship or fellowship or discipleship or any kind of thing. We've done an annual campaign, a spiritual growth campaign, almost every year in the 33 years of Saddleback Church. Nothing has made a bigger difference in our church, brought more people to Christ, caused us to baptize more people, and bring more people to maturity. Let me give you some statistics right up front, and then I want to explain to you the benefits and how your church could do a campaign. In the last 10 years, we have been doing what we call moving people into membership, building them up to maturity, training them for their ministry, and sending them out on their mission through what we call campaigns. And in the last 10 years, we have baptized here at Saddleback Church 27,000 new adult believers. 27,000. We have moved 32,000 people into small groups. Saddleback is the only church in America that has more people in Bible study than on the weekend. This weekend we'll have maybe 25,000 people in church. But I have 32,000 people meeting in Bible studies, 7,018 Bible studies every week. That's because of campaigns. 100% attributable to campaigns. We've moved over 21,000 into ministry in the community, and we've sent over 21,892 of our members overseas on mission to 196 nations of the world. Now, how do you do that? How do you bring 27,000 new believers in the front door, build them up to maturity, put them in small groups, train them for ministry, and then send 21,000 out the back door? There's only one way to do it. You have to have a process. And part of the purpose-driven process is the annual campaign. What will an annual 40-day campaign do for you? Well, number one, it'll grow your attendance. The most famous one, of course, is 40 Days of Purpose. Over 10% of the American church has done 40 Days of Purpose. Over 35,000 churches have done that campaign. The average church that has done a Saddleback campaign grows 28% over the 6 weeks. That's the average. Whether you have 60 people in your church or 600 in your church or 6,000, it will grow your attendance. Number two, it will increase your giving. Number three, it will unify your congregation. And the good news is that everything in the campaign is included for you. The sermons, the syllabuses, the studies, the small group material, the devotionals, the memory verses. It's literally add water and stir. Now, the campaign for this next year is called Transformed. And we're going to focus on transformation in 7 key areas of our lives. It's built on Romans 12, 1 and 2. Don't be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Now, you've studied that verse 4. You know that word transform is the Greek word metamorphosis. It's literally what a caterpillar does when it turns from a caterpillar into a butterfly. What we want to see is genuine life change in our members. You want to see that, and I want to see it in my church and in your church. So we're going to, over a 7-week period, not 6 weeks, but 7-week period this time, we're going to look at 7 key areas of life. Spiritual transformation and spiritual health, physical transformation and getting healthy physically, mental transformation, getting mentally healthy. We're going to look at emotional health and the transformation of your emotions. We're going to look at relational health and transforming your relationships. We're going to look at financial health and getting your finances in order. And we're going to look at vocational health, getting in the career and in the job God has planned for you. It is going to be the most powerful campaign Saddleback has done in 33 years. And I want to invite you to join us. Now, why does the campaign work so well? Because of multiple reinforcement. We call this the power of multiple reinforcement. We help people create habits so that long after the campaign is over, they keep doing something longer after that. For instance, studies have shown that it takes 6 weeks to develop a new habit. It takes 3 weeks for you to do it every day for you to become comfortable with it. And it takes another 3 weeks for you to do it and become ingrained in your life as a habit. The reason why most people in your church are not having a daily quiet time is they've never gone 6 complete weeks without missing one. What they do is they go a few days and they miss it. They go a few days and they miss it. And they go another few days and they miss it. They've never passed the 6-week barrier of creating habits. So what we do is we use the campaign to create the habit of worship, the habit of giving, the habit of a daily time with God, the habit of prayer. We teach them the habit of witnessing. We teach them the habit of fasting. In different campaigns, we teach different habits, but we do it through multiple reinforcement. Most of you know that my father was a pastor, my grandfather was a lay pastor, my great-grandfather was a pastor. I grew up in a church. And growing up, I watched my dad preach good sermons, and I thought, how is it that somebody can be a member of a church for 20 years, hear all these sermons, and not be spiritually mature? How is it they're still carnal, they're cranky, they're gossips, they're self-centered, they haven't put on the character of Christ? And I never understood this for a long time until one day I read a study by the U.S. Air Force, and it said this: we forget 90 to 95% of everything we hear within 72 hours. Now, if you want a statistic to depress the average pastor, that's it. I prepare 16, 18 hours on a message. I share it on Sunday. By Wednesday, my members have forgotten all but 5%, unless they wrote it down, which is why I never preach without an outline, handing out an outline. If somebody's never taken notes on me, they could have come to church for 30 years and forgotten everything I've said except 5%. That's discouraging. We need to be honest about the frank limitation of preaching. You don't even remember 90% of what you taught last week. You've already forgotten. I've forgotten what I sometimes I even forget the title that I preached on last week. The ear gate is limited. Now, we all learn in different ways, and so if we learn from multiple ways at the same time, it becomes multiple reinforcement. Let me explain it like this. Some people are ear gate learners. They learn through the ear. And if they hear it and then they get it, and they learn audio, they're auditory learners. If you're an ear gate learner, you love church. Because most of what we do in church is sit still while I talk. Sit still while I instill. And if you learn through the ear gate, you love church and you love listening to Bible studies. But a lot of people say, I don't like to listen, but I learn through the eye. I'm a visual learner. I learn through the eye gate. And I either like to read it or I like to watch it on a video. I like to see it. I don't learn through the ear. I learn through the eye. I'm a visual learner. Other people say, no, I don't like to listen and I don't like to read, but I like to talk. And they are a mouth gate learner. They are an oral learner. They learn by actually talking it. If you're an oral learner, you love small groups because that's where you get to speak. And a lot of people actually form their convictions by talking it out. They say, you know what I think? And as they talk it out, then they really do figure it out. They think by talking. Now, there are some people who say, I don't like to listen, and I don't like to read, and I don't like to talk. They're called men. They're called men. A lot of men are hand learners. They're kinetic learners. They learn through the hands. They learn by doing. They don't say, oh, give me a manual on football. They say, just start throwing me the football. They don't say, give me a manual on golf. They say, let me go out and start taking some swings. I'm just going to get under the hood of the car and figure out how to do it. I'm not going to read a manual. Don't give me a manual on how to put this stereo system together or wire this computer. They learn kinetically by doing it. Now, we all learn in different ways, and I got to thinking, what if we began to use all of those ways at the same time? So that if I wanted to, for instance, say, teach on worship, you would hear about worship, then you'd read about worship, then you'd talk about worship in a small group, then you'd watch about worship on a video in your small group, you'd memorize a Bible verse on it, and you'd do a worship project. We began to do this 33 years ago, and I began to notice the spiritual growth of my people began to soar. They were growing far faster through campaigns than through simply preaching a sermon series on it. Now, you can preach a sermon series that's on the purpose of life, and people are going to forget 95% of what you say. But if they hear it in a sermon, and they read it in a daily devotional, and they talk about it in a small group, and they watch it on a video, and they discuss it together, and they memorize a Bible verse, and they have a project to do it, that is like nailing that nail in the wood deeper, 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 deeper. That is the power of a campaign. If you've ever wanted to start small groups in your church, the secret of small groups is a campaign. Now listen very closely. People join a small group for content, and they stay in a small group for relationships. They join it because they get some content they can't get anywhere else, but they stay in it for relationships. Most of us have it backwards. For years, in fact, for 22 years, I tried to get people to join a small group by simply saying, you need the relationships. You need the one another's, the 58 one another's. Love one another, care for one another, pray for one another, help one another, serve one another. I said, you can't do these in a crowd. You can't do these with 50 people. You can only do them with 5 or 6 or maybe 8. You get more than 10 people in a group, somebody stops talking. In small groups, small is actually better. 4 is better than 6, and 6 is better than 8. Small is actually better. So you need large group worship and small group fellowship. The Bible calls this temple courts and house to house. And we teach about this in the Purpose Driven Church Conference, which if you haven't attended, I would encourage you to be a part of that. But one of the keys to small groups is to give them something in a small group they can't get anywhere else. I'll tell you this story. When I started Saddleback, we began talking about the small groups from the very beginning. By the time the church was 22 years old, I only had 800 small groups. Now that's a lot of groups for most churches, but for my size church, it wasn't large at all. I still had most people not in a group. And while attendance kept growing like this, small group was just growing like this. Well, how do I get more people? They're not going to really feel a part of church unless they're connected in a group. Your body is not one big cell, it's lots of cells together. And I kept saying, you need to be in a group for relationships. And everybody said, yeah, I know, Pastor Rick, but I'm too busy. I can't afford any other relationships right now. So we switched it. And we started offering something in small groups they couldn't get anywhere else. And I would say, for instance, in 40 Days of Purpose, I'm going to teach on the purposes of life for the next 6 weeks. But that's just the introduction. The real material is in the small groups. And unless you get in a small group, you're not going to be a part of it. And so I remember people saying, well, I want to get that material and I want to study that book and I want to read the thing. People wanted to join a small group. So I decided that we would do what I call exponential thinking. We were going to try to start 300 new small groups. God said, you haven't really believed me until you've attempted something that can't be done in the power of the flesh. So God said, add a 0. I said, 0? You mean 3,000 groups? Yeah. So he said, that's crazy. He said, well, do you believe me? Yeah, I believe you, God. Then go after 3,000 groups. I said, well, at least we'll make the attempt. So I remember the next Sunday, I stood up and said, folks, we're getting ready to go into our next annual campaign. And I said, I need 3,000 of you to be hosts of small groups. Now, the title of what you call your small groups is very important. When we started, we called our small group leaders lay pastors. It was a terrible title because we only got dozens because people said, I could never see myself as a pastor. It was too intimidating. It was too spiritual sounding. Said, I'm not a pastor. I would never be a pastor. I couldn't be a pastor. So then we changed the name from lay pastor to shepherd. Well, that was worse because most of my people never even seen a sheep. What's a shepherd? So then we changed the name to small group leader. And a lot of people said, but I'm not a leader. And then we changed the name to teacher. People said, but I can't teach. And finally, I was thinking about this one day, and I realized that in my small groups, or in my church, for every one person that has the gift of teaching, I have 10 with the gift of hospitality. So we changed the name to host. We said anybody can be a host. You just have to like people. If you're a senior citizen, you can be a host. If you're a teenager, you can be a host. If you're a non-Christian, you can be a host. If you're a brand new believer, you can be a host. And we said host stands for 4 things, H-O-S-T. If you want to be a host, I said, H, you have to like people. You have to have a heart for people. O, open up your home. S, serve something to drink. T, turn on the DVD player. I said, if you can do those 4 things, you can be a host. I said, I need 3,000 of you to be host. The next for this new campaign. The next day, Sunday, 3,200 people signed up to be host. I said, okay, you only need 1 hour of training. Come back tomorrow night, on Monday night, and we'll give you the materials for your small group, the DVD and the curriculum and all that. The next night, 3,200 people showed up. And I stood up and said, now, probably be a good idea if you're going to be a host, you probably ought to know the Lord. Do any of you need to be saved? 17 people raised their hand. I led them to Christ right there in prayer in front of all the other 3,000. Everybody broke out into applause. Then I said, now, if you're going to be host, probably ought to be baptized. That'd be a good thing for you to do. Anybody need to be baptized? That week, I baptized 400 people who wanted to be hosts. Now listen, if I talked about relationships, they wouldn't have got into the small group. But when I offered them a content they couldn't get anywhere else, we call it a campaign, they wanted to be a group. And so then after we had talked to them, we found some were living together. We said, you're not quite ready to be a host. We're going to make you an assistant, okay? Because we know you're going to work on this. We're going to get this worked out in your life. And other moral problems, we got all worked out. So we went from 800 small groups to 2,800 small groups in 1 week. That's the power of the campaign. You've never seen anything like this. Now, I only asked them for 6 weeks. I didn't ask them to be a small group leader for the rest of their lives. I said, will you be a host for 6 weeks? I said, at the end of 6 weeks, you don't like it, you can stop. Knowing that most of them would probably stop, but we would keep some and we would have a net growth. At the end of that first 6 weeks, when we did that, 2002, we lost about, I think, 1,000 groups. Yeah, 1,000 groups. People say, man, you lost 1,000 small groups. No, we gained 1,000 because we went from 800 to 1,800 in 6 weeks and kept over 1,000 of those groups. Now, since then, that was 10 years ago, we've learned how not to lose them. And in our last campaign, a year ago, when we did 40 days in the Word on Bible study methods, I don't think we lost a single group. We kept them all. We retained them all. Why? Because we know how to keep them. And I can share with you those secrets. I'm begging you to try this campaign. I believe that you will grow healthier, you will grow numerically, you will grow financially, you will grow in all these different areas. But you got to be willing to take a risk. Many of you have done a campaign with Saddleback in the past. This one, Transformed, is going to be the best one we've ever done. And it's going to be 7 areas that everybody, who doesn't want financial health? Who doesn't want spiritual health? Who doesn't want mental health, emotional health, relational health, marital health, vocational health? We all want these things. And if you'll join us this next year in 40 days of transformation, becoming all God meant for us to be, your people will be changed and your church will be changed forever. Let me help you out on this. Check it out. There's information at the bottom of the screen that you can go to and you can sign up and be a part. Go through it with us together. We'll provide all the materials. I'll give you sermon notes. We'll give you small group materials. We'll give you the DVDs. We'll give you the curriculum. It's literally add water and stir. You can do this. It doesn't matter if you have a church of 15 or a church of 1,500. I know a church of 15 that decided they were going to do a campaign. They had never had any small groups at all. and they set a goal of 7 small groups. I said, you only got 15 people. He said, but that's our exponential growth, 7 groups. And you know what? When they did 40 Days of Purpose, they ended up with 75 people in small groups, and that church exploded with growth. This can happen to you too. I hope you'll give us a chance. God bless you.